Good afternoon and welcome on this spring day. We hope it would have been a bit warmer, but it's still spring. We're pleased to take it the way it is. Welcome to the AJTP IADTCP webinar. We're dealing with, this is Mental Health Month, we have 3 webinars that have been taking place. We've already had a presentation on treatment and legal issues arising from mental health courts. Mental illness is a challenge for all of us in different ways and manifests itself in different ways. And today we are very pleased to be presenting, to have experts on, to talk to you about the MOST program. I am not going to try to tell you what that's about or even explain the what it stands for. I'll leave that to the experts, but we just want to thank them ahead of time. What we've created and what we have here is a forum to allow us to share ideas on very important topics. So you could always visit www.justicetreatment.org you'll see a catalog of past webinars, and you also see a library that will assist in providing you information on various topics. We are always looking for new ideas and new topics to cover. We are very grateful for the experts like those today who have always assisted us. So if you, on the website, there's a get involved section where you can click to let us know what you want to hear. You can comment on what we are doing. We are looking forward to this space, and it's been a very effective and interesting space so far. The panelists are reminded to mute their microphones and then unmute them when they're speaking. And also, you know, there's a Q&A. There's a Q&A section here. We'd love to be able to communicate with you. The Q&A is the way you ask your questions, and please send us your questions using the Q&A. And also a recorded version of this webinar will be available at justicetreatment.org about 2 or 3 days after the webinar is over. I would also like to thank the organizing committee here. Kim Briggs, you can see Kim Briggs there. There's Andre Rivard, who is with us. You can see him. Jennifer Graham is involved. Erin Smith is also involved. Myself, Justice Barnes, we are part of the organizing committee, but we do this with the help of so many people, so we're always looking for volunteers. And now that I have spent some time talking to you, the purpose of talking to you was to allow more and more people to join. I will now go to a very important portion of today's proceedings, which is the land acknowledgement. So Andre Rivard would do the land acknowledgement at this time.
Your Honor, thank you. As a committee, it's important for us to acknowledge the land on which this webinar is taking place. We all come together virtually from different corners of the province and country, but we wanted to make sure that we acknowledge the Aboriginal land that is inhabited by Indigenous peoples from the beginning. We're grateful for this opportunity to meet here, and we thank the generations of people that have taken care of our land for thousands of years. Long before today, there have been Aboriginal people who are stewards of our land. In particular, we'd like to acknowledge the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe Chippewa peoples, land that has been home to the Métis and most recently the territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, as the direct descendants of the Mississaugas of the Credit in the region of Peel. We recognize that and are deeply appreciative for their historic connection to the land and the contributions of the Métis, Inuit, and other Indigenous peoples that have been made to help shape and strengthen our community in particular, province, and the country as a whole. As settlers, the recognition of this contribution is very important historically, and it's connected both overtly and intrinsically to the commitment made by our government in the challenge of the truth and reconciliation. To allow that to be real and authentic, we have to bring lives to the justice for lives lost in residential schools, as well as missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls across our country. So it's from that framework that I acknowledge the land from which we present. I'd like to turn it over to my co-presenter, Kim Briggs, and she will give you a background information about our participants today. Kim.
Thanks very much, Andre, and thank you everybody for joining us today to talk further about mental health in the justice system. We're very lucky today to have the Chief of Police of the St. Thomas Police Service here with us, Police Chief Harridge. And he started his career with the St. Thomas Police Service way back in 1989 as a cadet with the service. He spent a decade on the General Patrol Unit, Traffic Unit, and in training. And then he began to climb the ranks, first with Sergeant in 1998, then Staff Sergeant in 99, and ultimately moving over to the administrative side of policing as Inspector and Staff Inspector in 2017. Chief Harridge was appointed Acting Chief of Police in 2017, and he officially took over as Chief of Police in 2018. And Chief Harridge has been very vocal in the community and in the media as well about his belief that changes are needed within our criminal justice system to more effectively support people who are struggling with mental illness, addiction issues, and homelessness. So thanks for being with us. We also have Megan Smythe and Holly Lauzon, who work for the Canadian Mental Health Association on the MOST team. Megan is a registered social worker with a Bachelor of Social Work from King's University College, and she's also pursuing her Master of Social Work from the University of Waterloo. She's worked with CMHA for 3 years and joined the MOST team just over a year ago on March 2021. Holly is also a registered social work with a Bachelor of Social Work from King's. She's worked for CMHA for 3 years also and joined the MOST team most recently in September of 2021 and is enjoying her time so far with the team. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll pass it on to you guys.
Thank you, Kim. I'll start off, and thanks to your committee for the great work you're doing and for having us here today to talk about, as Justice Barnes alluded to, a very important topic, mental health, impacting our communities right across the country, along with addictions, poverty, and homelessness. I'll touch on a number of those issues, and at the end, I'll turn it over to Megan and Holly to talk about our MOST team and the terrific work that they are doing here in St. Thomas and have been doing for a number of years. I just want to start off with, I usually say this disclaimer. I'm far from an expert in some of these issues. My observations, my opinions are based on 34 years of policing in St. Thomas only, no other community. And the observations that I have made, working in patrol, as you alluded to, Kim, and I oversaw court services for 6 years. So I had some experience working in the courts as well, and the number of observations that I've made. And yes, I've been around a little long in the tooth, 34 years, and I've seen some great changes, and I've seen some great challenges that have come to our community and to our profession as well in policing. Most importantly, if there's anything that you remember from my conversation today, and that's some of these words, I want you to take away that handcuffs and incarceration is not always the answer. We got to find a better way to treat our fellow citizens, to give them an opportunity to make them productive members of our society. And that's very important. We cannot arrest our way out of this problem. We see what's happening south of the border in the US with the lengthy jail sentences, and it's not working in the United States, and it's not going to work here. And most importantly, people do not wake up every morning. People are not born in this world and go, I want to be addicted to drugs, or I want to have a mental health problem, or I want to live in poverty, or I want to live in homelessness. And those are some takeaways I want you to remember. And I pull at the heart a little bit there because I feel that that's important. And I see some of the comments on social media when we post on Facebook, with what's happening in the community, and we are very transparent. And I think it's because of that transparency that we have in the community. We have such a following and such a tremendous support from those who we serve. these issues are complex, they are challenging, and they are very delicate. And our overall goal is to enhance the well-being of our community. And, you know, the MOST team is a perfect example of that. And again, Holly and Megan will talk about that a little later. I'll touch on another story I like to tell, actually a couple stories, again, just to pull at the heartstrings, to bring attention to the challenges that we are facing. And that's the deal with Ryan's house in Sarnia, and that's a withdrawal treatment facility. And that's something we desperately need here in our community as well. But, you know, I did a news article, TV, I guess, with the London CTV News, and I spoke about the needs that we require here in St. Thomas to address the challenges we are facing. And I had a lady call me up the next day to tell me a story, a very heart-touching story about how Ryan's house was created in Sarnia. And she wanted me to share that. And I do share it pretty much every time I have an opportunity to speak like I am today. And that facility came out of her push because unfortunately her son passed away due to substance use disorder. And it just goes to show how these issues can impact anyone. And that's another thing we have to get rid of, as well as the stigmatization that comes along with having this thought that only certain people are impacted by mental health and addictions, which is far from the truth. This young man was a pretty good hockey player and sustained a serious hip injury. And as a part of his recovery, he was put on some narcotics and became addicted, and his life just spiraled out of control. Made his way actually out of the community into another community to a treatment facility because there was nothing local to assist him, and did very well on the eastern part of Ontario. Spoke with his mom. He wanted to stay in that city because he did not want to come back home and to hook up with his friends, and he knew what was going to happen if that occurred. And unfortunately, mom had no means to get to this city where he was living in Ontario, quite a ways away, and he needed some of his property and belongings transported down there. So he decided to make the trip home to get those belongings so he could go back to Ottawa. And it was he wasn't home 24 hours before his mom got a phone call from the police, and he had passed away, an overdose. And that's such a sad story. Put a lump in my throat, and it still does when she told me that. And it just, you know, she had that drive to move forward and do something about the lack of facilities in Sarnia. And those are the stories that I hear that, you know, that gives me the drive to do something about the issues that we are Young Street. And not you, Holly and Megan, of course, but someone my age for sure, and others. And homelessness, poverty, drug use was there 30 years ago. And here we are 30 years later, and it's crossed the threshold of every community pretty much right across our country. And how did we let that happen? And we all own this issue, and we are all responsible for finding solutions that work to this problem. And I often think that maybe we've turned a blind eye to it because it only impacted the bigger cities, you know, Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal. And over the years, it's caught up to us. And it's not only these social issues that we have to address, it's the as I call it, the collateral fallout with regards to property crime. Because we all know that someone living in poverty or someone who has a substance use disorder, they turn to crime. And we're seeing that here in St. Thomas. Our crime stats have shot up significantly. In 2016, we had 14,000 occurrences that we were responding to. And in 2021, 2022, we're pushing over 22,000. And a lot of those have to do with the social determinants of health here in our community. And as a result of that, that drives up our property crime. which is really, it's gone through the roof with theft and break and enters. And I know from our street crime unit, they are telling me that someone who has an addiction, it's costing about $60 a day to support that addiction. So, and that's one person. So keep that in mind. One person needs $60 a day, 365 days of the year. Where are they going to find that money? They find that money through crime, unfortunately. And that's where we sometimes get caught in the middle because we are being pulled in two directions here in this profession. Through, we need to support the victim of crime, but we also have to be compassionate and empathetic to the vulnerable citizens as well. And I go back to Facebook again, I see some comments on there, and there are definitely two sides, people on both sides of the fence to this issue on how we should deal with it. And trying to balance that sure is delicate and sensitive, especially again in our profession, especially as the chief of police, because I often get a lot of calls about this crime issue, about what's happening in our downtown core and what am I going to do about it. And you know, I don't point fingers at any individuals. It's a system. You know, it's the justice system, it's the medical system, it's the health system, it's the education system. It's all of us, and we have to work within the parameters that we have to work within. And we often got criticized, probably up to about a year ago, for releasing people. Not only us, but our friends in the justice sector as well. And I know there are rules, and the criminal code and the Supreme Court of Canada, they make rules that we have to work within. But the average person in the public, they do not understand that. And so that's one of the reasons why maybe about a year ago or so, we start publishing court dispositions. And again, it was not to point the finger at anyone, it was to explain to the public and to open their eyes as to what is happening and that the supports that we need. And we need the community on our side, because all of us in policing and those watching here today, we cannot fix this problem alone. We have to have a united voice and advocate together so that we can get the attention of those that have the capability to give us the resources so that we can do the job and help out our communities and enhance the well-being and safety of the communities that we live, work, and play in. And that takes me to some of the issues that we're seeing in the justice system with regards to the revolving door, as I call it, repeat offenders. And that's a challenge for us. That's a challenge for you. It's a challenge for all of our partners in the community on how do we address this problem, because it just takes me back to handcuffs and incarceration is not the answer. We actually need pre-arrest diversion. We have lots of post-arrest programs that we can utilize. I shouldn't say lots, we got some. I'm not too sure if they're all working or not, but we need pre-arrest opportunities. Why do I have to arrest someone and take that person to court in order to get them some help? I should be able to, if that person fits within whatever the category that could be established, if they fit within that category, why can I not, or the officers on the front line, have options to take that person to a place before they have to end up in the justice system? Because that's not the answer. You know, this is a perfect example. I go out and walk foot patrol sometimes in the summer, and last summer I was walking downtown St. Thomas and came across, it's probably about 2 in the morning, and I came across this young lady that was sleeping in front of the drop-in center in downtown St. Thomas on the west end, and had no place to go. She was asleep there and really did not want to go to our overnight shelter. And it's for a number of reasons that I don't need to get into, but you know what? She was experiencing some withdrawal. She is or was addicted to drugs, and I had no place to take her. I had no detox location. We had no withdrawal management facility. And if I was to say to that person, you know, and I believe it was early Friday morning or early Saturday morning, I want you on Monday to make an appointment with Addiction Services Thames Valley, for example, and we know that's going to be, there's a waiting period. There's going to be a number of days to get in there. And we also know that by the time that appointment rolls around, even if it is Monday morning, we are going to lose that person. And that person is lost to her addiction again. And that's what we need. We need those immediate access to resources. We need resources on the ground 24/7, 365. And I know Holly and Megan will touch on this. They can't reach everyone. I think, and I'm sure they'll correct me if I'm wrong, the last time we spoke about this, I think they're maybe touching on about 35% of the calls for service that we have with mental health here in St. Thomas. And our numbers are over 2,000. And we classify any incident that has a mental health theme. That for us, that's a mental health incident. And those numbers are over 2,000, which is incredible for a community our size. And we just do not have the resources. And we need resources like Holly and Megan, because we are not experts in the social determinants of health. I call our members street corner psychiatrists, because that's what we've become. We receive minimal training. A little bit when we go on the recruit course at OPC. I'm not too sure if I received any. Mind you, that was 34 years ago. We didn't have the issues that we have today, but I do know they do receive some training, and we do try and get some training in-house here when time permits. But as you know, there's so much training, there's so much demand on policing. Trying to fit in training. We have over 100, I believe we have over 120 members here now. That's a challenge in itself. But again, is it the answer to have police officers going to these types of calls for service? You know, I think about 911. 911, you get police, you get EMS, you get fire. How about throwing in mental health in there? So when someone calls up 911 and they need mental health, we have that support. Of course, we will always be there as police officers to support those incidents that may have a safety concern. Absolutely, we're there 100% and will always be. But when you send someone in uniform wearing a vest, a tactical vest, with all kinds of equipment, a taser in some cases, magazines for a rifle, in a dark uniform, showing up in a marked police car to a person who is suffering a crisis, what message are we sending to that person? All we're doing is just ramping up their anxiety. And here's a perfect example of that. We started our mental health collaboration back in the fall of 2017, thanks to some grant funding from the provincial government. And a colleague of Holly and Megan's, probably before their time, I'm not too sure, Alex Patterson from CMHA, she started the ball rolling here in St. Thomas with our mental health collaboration. 2 officers responded to a young woman in distress, and actually got worse when they showed up. So they decided, they thought Alex was, should come down and help out. Alex showed up, and the situation de-escalated almost immediately. You can't put a price on that for me. And that's what we need, boots on the ground. Not officers showing up dressed in dark uniforms, marked police cars, and tactical vests to deal with these issues. I'm not too sure if anyone's seen the Coroner's Inquest report that just came out a few days ago. And it was a shooting in Hamilton 3 years ago. And it involved a mental health person, unfortunately, and the person passed away as a result of that interaction with the Hamilton police. And out of that inquest, it was recommended that the Hamilton police have access to mental health 24/7, 365. And I read that and thought, first thing came to my mind, why does it take this sad interaction to occur between police and a member of the public for someone to go, we need mental health 24/7, 365, boots on the ground to work in our communities and work with the police? So important. We've been trying to enhance our team, our most team here in St. Thomas. Twice now I have applied for grants and we've been turned down. And I spoke to my counterparts at the Solgen's office, and because I struggle with the fact that we have a mental health issue across this province, but we had to compete with each other to get funding. It doesn't make sense at all. And this last round of funding, there was an envelope of $4 million. And I know in St. Thomas what it cost us to have Holly and Megan here. And out of this last grant, we were turned down again. 28 municipalities received funding, 17 with the OPP, 11 municipal police services. Out of that 4 million, if you were to take the salary of a mental health worker and divide that into $4 million, it would have worked out to about 46 mental health workers, boots on the ground in 46 different municipalities across this province. Wouldn't that be the right thing to do? Is that not what we're trying to do? Enhance the well-being of our community? And that's an excellent way to do that. And I said that to the soldier, and I have not received a response yet. I just sent my email off last week, and I think that's a breakdown in communication. We need to talk, and we all I think can agree that communication and education is so important when we're dealing with these issues. And that's why we're here today to talk about it. And how do we make a difference? How do we voice our concerns and bring it forward? Just quickly, I just made a couple notes on some things that we are doing here in St. Thomas. And I got to thank our council and Mayor Joe Preston for their partnership with Indwell. And if anyone's not familiar with Indwell, they have a number of buildings in Ontario, and basically it's housing and wraparound services that they provide. And we just opened up our first facility in St. Thomas back in the fall, 15 apartment actually facility, and moved 15 of our high-risk people into that building. And I can tell you, we took a look at some stats. In the first 9 months of 2021, and we just looked at our stats in the downtown, we had over 900 calls for service. Since we've moved those 15 people into the Indwell facility, our calls for service in the downtown have dropped over 80%, actually 87% monthly. That is tremendous. Not only because it drops the number of calls for service, it drops the interactions, the risks that we have when we deal with persons facing vulnerabilities, but it puts a roof over their head, more importantly than anything, and it provides them with that wraparound service that they need to be productive members of our society. And moving forward, there's another facility being built on the West End. I believe that's going to be house 45 people, and then within about another year and a half, there's going to be another facility in central St. Thomas, in the center of the downtown, housing, I think that might be 20 plus more. So that's tremendous. And it just goes to show that if you have housing, you have wraparound services, you have teams like Holly and Megan on the front line, these things can work. We can make people productive members of society. We can reduce crime, because if we're dropping 995 calls for service, that's reducing crime in our downtown. If we're providing wraparound services to those that need help so they can come off their addiction or move away from their addiction, they do not need to rely on crime to support their addiction. If they have a house over their head and they have food, clothing, and shelter, they do not need to resort to crime. This all works together. It's all connected. There's a nexus. And that's what we need to push for, and we need to be united by voice. I could go on with a lot more, and I made some more notes, but that's 30 minutes, and I want to be able to have some time for fair time to Megan and Holly, because they truly are heroes in my mind in our community, along with all their colleagues across the province who are doing great work on the front line, and then give our folks who are watching some Q&A time. So Kim, I guess if you don't mind, I'll turn it over to Holly and Megan to take it from here.
Hi, thanks. So I guess what we can start with is just kind of giving you a picture of what the most program in St. Thomas looks like, what our hours are like, that sort of thing. So currently the team consists of Megan and myself, and then we also have a designated mental health officer, Constable Jeremy Linker. He couldn't be with us today, So we are working currently Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. And that would be a 1-week rotation. So for example, this week, Megan is working 8 o'clock till 4, and then I come in for the rest of the shift, 3 till 11. During the day shift, it's normally one of us. So it'd be Megan this week with Jeremy. And then when I'm on afternoons 3 to 11, I'm usually with one of the road officers and riding with them throughout their shift. We do most of our calls are live calls. So a call comes in to dispatch or 911. It's determined that they might need mental health support. So we go to that call in the moment. When we get there, we do a lot of assessment, some de-escalation, determining different things, like if that means we can apprehend if absolutely needed. We try to de-escalate so that doesn't need to happen. And then if, for example, a call came in and we weren't available, or it was time that we're not here, or if it was like on the weekend or something, that we also get follow-up calls come in. So we'll get that to our email, and the officers will give us some information about that call, and then we follow up with that individual later, and we can help assist them with whatever it is they're looking for. So that's one way that we would get follow-ups. Another way that we would do a follow-up is, say we did meet with someone at a live call and we couldn't finish everything we were looking to do in that moment. We might reach out to them again later, just to tie up some loose ends maybe, or just even if they're looking for more support and need some guidance on where to go or who to talk to, we can follow up that way. Another huge part of our role is officer mental health support. So as much as we are helping the community, we're really helping the individuals that we're working with here at the station as well. They go through a lot in the stuff that they're dealing with. And so it's really nice that they have someone like Megan or I, who are mental health professionals, and they can speak to about what's going on in their life. And if they're needing support or they're needing recommendations or referrals, we can do that for them right here on the spot. So the goal mostly of our program is hospital diversion and justice diversion, which we have found, I think a lot of the times that calls even, it's kind of funny and nice to see that now that we've been working with the officers, they'll say things to us after our call, like, you know, if you weren't here, we probably would have apprehended that person. And even just with working with them so closely, a lot of them are gaining a lot of confidence in knowing the different signs of mental health and what to look out for and risk factors and that sort of thing. So even when we're not here, they're more likely to have confidence in whether they actually need to apprehend someone or if they can de-escalate that on their own. We do a lot of service connections. So the nice part about us going to live calls is we can refer people to services right on the spot. They don't have to wait. They don't have to do it on their own. So for example, like someone needing some addiction support, we have like backdoor access to getting them connected quicker and easier. And then they also have a point person later on in the future if they have questions or they need help navigating that system. They've already met with us face to face. We've built some rapport and they hopefully have some trust in us, and we can get them connected right away. We try to help individuals get connected to services so that we can kind of decrease their involvement with police in the future. So I think that there's been a lot of people who've had a lot of involvement with police, and then once we kind of get connected with them, they sometimes, instead of having to call police all the time, they can even just call us directly, and we can kind of direct them on where they need to go or de-escalate and that sort of thing. Because a lot of the time it's not really something that the police have to do. It's something that like a mental health professional would be more appropriate for. The style of work that we do and the types of assessments and things that we would do is we really focus on brief solution focused situations. So when we're at a call, we're really trying to come up with a solution in the moment quickly so that the officers aren't there for hours on end trying to de-escalate or figure out what to do. We always focus on a trauma-informed lens, crisis intervention, and we hold a huge importance on assessments. We're constantly doing mental health assessments. Even when the interaction with someone is just a few seconds, we're constantly doing an assessment to see what's going on, the background information, what needs to happen afterwards. Do they need to be connected to services? What do they need? And a huge part is just knowing what's available in our community. The police, they have enough to deal with on their end. We focus on knowing what services are available, what you need to get connected to those services, what the criteria is, eligibility, all of that stuff, so that when we're meeting with someone or following up with them, we know exactly what's available to them and we can give them every option that's most suitable for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so kind of touching on what Holly mentioned. So really our main focus is just general diversion, both from the justice system and certainly from the hospital system. In situations where we do attend calls and the person is high risk and it's determined that hospitalization would be beneficial, we always try to convince the person to go voluntarily. So that means they are going with EMS in an ambulance to the hospital on their own without police presence. That's always our preferred method of getting people the care they need. That's not always possible. When a person is being apprehended, I think one of the really unique parts of our role is that sometimes it makes all the difference to tell the person, like, hey, we've talked for 30 minutes, we've gotten to know each other a little bit, and we are going to come with you. We're going to come with you to the hospital. I'll sit with you while you wait, and we can get you a drink if you need. We can talk some more. And I find sometimes people knowing that and just knowing that we are social workers and we are mental health professionals really brings a lot of comfort to people in those moments of crisis. And sometimes that makes all the difference, is just knowing that there's somebody else there that they can talk to that kind of has an idea of what's been going on, and that's going to be able to link them to appropriate services so that hopefully things are better the next time we have to interact with them, or ultimately hoping that we don't have any further interaction with those individuals. I think in situations where there's been sort of like repeat callers would be how we would kind of define those individuals. Like, for example, we had an individual in the summer who was calling 911 a lot, who dealt with like paranoid delusions and hallucinations, and would always be fearful and hearing that somebody was trying to get into their house. It was ultimately found after a few times of police responding without one of us that this was not the case and there was something more going on. So we took the time with that individual to connect them to a case manager and worked through a plan with that person so that when you think you hear somebody coming in the door, or you think you've heard the doorbell, here's kind of the steps you're going to take before we go the route of police. And that dramatically decreased the amount of calls that we were getting. I don't think we've heard from that person in quite some time. That plan has really worked for them, and basically connecting them to the more appropriate resources to manage their symptoms instead of just going to calling police and having police respond and not really necessarily have the knowledge of what exactly is going on and how to help support that person in the moment. So situations like that, I think those are really clear examples of where our team is really useful. I also think that while we're mostly focused on sort of like the mental health calls, when we're on afternoon shift, like we respond to just regular police calls with the officer we ride with. And sometimes it's something that we wouldn't necessarily get dispatched to, but having us there is helpful. So for example, even something like domestic violence calls or family disputes, things like that, that aren't necessarily like, for example, a suicidal person, which is a lot of the calls that we're responding to. But those calls, having us there and having the resources, the knowledge of the community resources that we have is still helpful in that moment. And I think that's where it's really beneficial that we also get to do those ride-alongs outside of working with Constable Linker too, because the officers get an idea of the breadth of knowledge that we do have with respect to resources. When maybe they wouldn't have thought of calling most in the first place, but now that we're there, we're able to connect that person to some counseling for domestic violence related issues, for example. And that's something that they might not have been linked to had we not been there. So I think that's another important piece of the work that we do. We've certainly seen a large increase in our call volume. Like Chief said, St. Thomas is a city that has a lot of needs for mental health, substance use, and housing. For a small community like we are, those needs are certainly very clear, even just to the general public. So just some statistics for you, like from January 1st to today, we've served 250 individuals already this year. 36 of those individuals are children under the age of 18. And out of that 250, 220 of those people have been provided some sort of community referral. So essentially, pretty much every call we attend or every follow-up we complete, we're making some sort of link to some type of community support, whether that's counseling, addiction support, the shelter. So we'll often call the shelter, make sure there's space for an individual. We can often sometimes offer a ride for them to go down there. Crisis lines, family counseling, pretty much you name it, any kinds of those types of resources, connecting them to somebody to help them fill out subsidized housing applications. Things like that are all things that we do very often. I think one of the challenges in St. Thomas is that although I think in general, our community is pretty understanding of the needs of some of the more vulnerable individuals who live here, I think that we still are quite under-resourced in terms of what we truly need to support individuals. And while London is certainly not far, for somebody who doesn't have access to money for a taxi, for example, or their own car, or somebody to provide them with a ride to get access to some of the more intensive supports that might be available in London, that person is left with pretty much no options. So something like detox, like Chief mentioned, that would be huge for our community. While we can refer to addiction services, again, calling detox in London, even if they do have a bed, which is not often, unfortunately, because I think they have a pretty large need there too. It's arranging a ride. So trying to figure out with the person, okay, so how are you going to get to London? And more often than not, that person has no access to that type of transportation. And the transportation piece is one of the things that I think certainly CMHA as an organization has been made aware of, and trying to secure some funding to make some of those connections. Especially we're now an integrated organization with CMHA Middlesex, Oxford, and Addiction Services. So I think that that integration may present some opportunities for us to be able to better serve some of the needs of the people that we interact with. And while we have our shelter and lots of supportive housing, I think we have probably the most supportive housing for a town of this size and in this region. I think it also draws a lot of individuals from out of town into St. Thomas who maybe don't have access to those resources and are looking for more support. And the sad part is that we don't even have enough for the people who live here, let alone people who are coming from out of region. So things like the supportive housing that's being built by Endwell, like those things make a huge difference. I can think of a few people we've dealt with who, you know, we've had repeated involvement with, and then we see them become housed and all of a sudden, zero police interaction. It's really amazing what happens when somebody has their basic needs met. Because when we start with the housing, then we can really start to tap into substance use and mental health and education and employment and some of those bigger pieces that are just not achievable when somebody doesn't have their shelter needs met. So I think that's another huge success of the program is we certainly get to see people, you know, when they first become involved with most and police, and just the vulnerability that's there. And then flash forward a few months down the line, some of those services have started to become involved, and that person's picture of what's going on for them has completely changed. And that's really amazing to see. And I think probably for both of us, one of our favorite parts of the work that we do is just those small wins, celebrating those. I think for children and youth, particularly with the pandemic, kids being out of school, we've seen a large increase in calls with families who are looking for support for their child or youth who's struggling with their mental health. And that's another challenge here is, again, just the lack of children's specific mental health resources in St. Thomas. A lot of those more intensive supports are located in London. That's certainly a challenge that we see as well. But similar to how Holly spoke about just a lot of the officers, after they work with us for a little while or they take us on a few ride-alongs, it really is amazing to see they have a real interest in learning more, and they ask us questions like, how can I better address this issue? Or what would be something that I could say to somebody experiencing this? And I think that's huge. I think that's a huge strength of our service here. And just with the needs we have in the community, it's really important that officers are open and willing and wanting to learn more about mental health. I think it's really wonderful to see that they certainly are listening to what we're saying to people and learning from us and asking questions. And then they are extremely capable of handling situations even when we're not there. And I think even for Constable Winker, there's been a huge increase in his confidence in dealing with some of the individuals that we serve, even when we're not present. We've learned a lot from each other, us learning from him about the police side of things and vice versa. And I think we've been able to share that knowledge with a lot of the other officers here, which just helps them to be sort of better equipped to deal with some of the challenges that we face every day here. So I certainly think more resources would be beneficial and more of us. I think it's pretty nice to see just the way someone's demeanor changes when we arrive and we say, hi, like my name's Megan. I'm not a police officer. I'm a social worker. How can I help? And people's level of agitation will, like, you see it go right down a lot of the time when they feel like they're talking to somebody who understands really what they're going through. And sometimes people have had police involvement in the past that maybe has not been pleasant for them. And so having a neutral person there is really beneficial in those situations for sure. Yeah, so that's kind of an overview of what we do, but I'm happy to answer, or we're happy to answer any questions that anybody might have as well.
Thank you very much to the three of you. So we will enter our question and answer portion of this webinar. I'm sure there's lots of questions out there and some starting to come in. So the first one we'll start with, this one would be to the chief. You mentioned stigma and talked about the barrier that stigma presents to treatment and to wellness within our community, and just how it impacts our community as a whole. And an audience member would like to know how you have worked towards minimizing stigma within the St. Thomas Police Service.
Well, first of all, everyone that gets hired here at the St. Thomas Police Service, the last step of the process is a meeting with me, and we have that conversation. We have that conversation about mental health, not only out in the field, but also internally. And it is stressed that we will not stigmatize mental health in our community and in our organization. So that is, the tone is set right from the onset of when a person is hired here. But more importantly, it's the natural evolution that occurred when we started the collaboration with CMHA, and Megan just spoke about that. That influence, that learning that Holly, Megan, and their predecessors from CMHA has passed on to our members have definitely, I wouldn't say open their eyes, but kind of broaden their horizons to mental health and how to be compassionate, how to be empathetic. But we also know that mental health is impacting police members tremendously over the past 4 or 5 years across the profession. So again, I think that it's just a natural evolution through our partnership with CMHA, and the fact that we're seeing our own members impacted by mental health as well. And when you're impacted yourself, you sure do get a new appreciation for the challenges.
Absolutely. If you don't mind, I'll add to that as well, Chief Harridge. I also myself have been part of training all of your officers and all of your civilian staff in mental health first aid, which this goes back a few years now, or several years even, but every single member of your service, including dispatchers, maintenance staff, all of the officers, yourself included, took 2 days, which is quite an extensive time commitment for every single person in your service to participate in that training. So that in itself speaks to your dedication to mental health. And I also know that you're participating in doctorate and PhD level research regarding mental health in the workplace as far as police. So it's quite clear that you're passionate about this issue and helping to move this issue forward within our community.
Absolutely, and you're right. We were the first police service in all of Ontario to have every member of our staff trained in mental health first aid, And I didn't know how much time we were going to have, but maybe I can quickly just jump in here and talk about a new program that we are going to start. And that's a community resource officer program. And I'm just working on the job ad right now, actually, and hopefully I'll have it out on Friday. And that's to hire 4 special constables with a mental health background. And their focus will be in our downtown, working with people impacted by vulnerabilities and assisting those people with navigating the system and the needs to assist them move ahead in life. So we're really excited to get this program off the ground. I think we'll be one of the first, if not the first, in St. Thomas. I do know there's another municipality talking about doing the same. So we're really looking forward to this. And I think this is another great opportunity to work with our MOS team and our officers and our other community partners to enhance the overall well-being of our community.
Yeah, those are groundbreaking sort of programs. So it'll be interesting to see. I'll be watching. Next question. This is a 3-part question. Is this a pilot project? How long have you been running in St. Thomas? And will you be increasing to 7 days a week?
Well, I'll start off, I guess, and so Megan and Holly can jump in. We started this in the fall of 2017, and we had some grant funding at that time to get the program off the ground. And that grant funding was for 12 months. And after 12 months, there was no more money, unfortunately, coming from the provincial level. But I can tell you that our partners at CMHA stepped up to bridge a gap. And then city council stepped up to bridge the gap. And through being a squeaky wheel, I guess, as MPP Urick put it, Minister Elliott, Minister Jones, and Minister Urick showed up here with some funding indefinitely for Alex at the time. And then we were able to secure some more indefinite funding through the province as well. And that's why we have 2. I would love, if I could expand this unit, and I'm sure Holly and Megan would agree, in our community as well, I'd expand it tomorrow. We need 24/7, 365 resources. And you just heard Holly and Megan speak and the impact that they are having in the community, the impact that we are seeing in the community, and you know, the impact I'm hearing about it in the community as well. When I go to community events, I see it on social media. And council, they support it, our police services board support it. And how can we not move forward? I just need to get that funding and make the provincial powers to be with you know, that funding envelope to see it as well, and the gains that we can create in our province by expanding our mental health collaboration.
It's always a funding issue, isn't it? It's an ongoing theme.
As well.
Yes.
Yeah,
I'm not too sure if I covered all 3 parts, but
I think so. Did you have something to add, Megan, to that?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, some of the police services in this region are starting to also adopt mental health teams. So I think that's sort of becoming the trend, or the norm anyways, I hope, is to have mental health professionals working alongside police. So my sort of assumption will be that that will be kind of the way of the future. And I know that at CMHA, we've definitely been putting in some work recently to develop a really comprehensive sort of like program development tool, which tracks very specific data about the types of people we interact with, what the presenting issues are, and outcomes after involvement with us, to try to provide a really clear picture so that the next time grant applications come out, we've got a really comprehensive look at what exactly it is we're doing and what kind of impact we're having on the community. And my hope is that, I think everyone's hope with the CMHA side of things is that that will really help to secure future funding as well.
We have a question from somebody in the audience here. They want to know if you guys always wear your vests, that their CMHA has a similar program, but they don't want to wear vests due to concerns about stigma and as a barrier to supporting clients. What do you think the pros and cons are of wearing the vest? And, you know, what's your perspective about that?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. This topic has come up a lot. We're actually working on a new uniform. So right now we have like the external vest, the same as what police would wear, except it has not any of the equipment on it that you would see on a police vest. And really, like, the bottom line with that is really, it's just a safety thing. There's certainly been, I think it's helpful to have like the large CMHA logo. in our community, CMHA is kind of like the go-to for adult mental health needs. And so that acronym is really widely recognized by people. They see it, they kind of know what it is, and they know what to expect from you. But we are working on kind of changing to a different uniform. So Constable Linker has already made that change. And we're just waiting on some logistical pieces to be able to make the same change, which would be to wear the same vest, but internal. So it would be underneath a more plain clothes looking shirt that would say CMHA on it, with casual pants and more casual shoes, which is what we wear now. And like I said, Constable Linker has changed to that uniform already. It's just very much a sort of gentler look to a traditional police uniform, where he doesn't have the vest on over top. It's underneath sort of like a golf style shirt that just says police on it, and like khaki pants instead of the more traditional look. So that's something that we're working on as well. I think there's obviously a safety pro, but definitely some cons as well. I think anytime you have any type of formalized looking uniform, it makes a certain kind of statement about the position you hold and like some power dynamics and the interactions with clients. So I think a softer look will certainly help with that. Because a lot of times right now, people, they do think we're police often. They just assume if we're with the police officers and we have the vest on, then we must also be officers also. So we have to kind of be pretty blunt about, nope, I'm a social worker and this is what I'm here for. So my hope is that with the new uniform, there will be lots of pros. A couple of people in the community have been pretty complimentary of Constable Linker's new uniform already. They like the look of that. So I think that's kind of how we'll look too. That's the goal, to kind of model what he's wearing and have it be similar, but I think maybe us in a different color just to differentiate us more from police, but similar kind of look for sure. So I think there's benefits and negatives.
And we are doing the same with the special constable team as well, Kim. Once we land on a uniform, it will be a de-escalated type of uniform to make that team approachable as well in the downtown.
A relatively minor thing, but likely to have some pretty major impacts in the people you're interacting with. Yeah, thank you. So I think we're pretty much out of time here, but we thank you very much for coming and sharing your expertise and your experience in this field. I'm sure everybody learned a lot today. Chief Herod, you talked on so many important issues, how we all own this issue and we all have some responsibility in responding differently. And one of our guests posted a quote that I think is the best quote we could ever finish with, but there are no hopeless cases, only hopeless methods. And I think that sort of sums up what you spoke to today, Chief Herod. So thank you very much, you guys, and we'll be in touch soon. Take care.